You are listening to the Hostage to the Devil podcast. Some listeners may find this content disturbing.
I don't think that you could listen to Malachi. I never met the man in person, but I interviewed him for countless hours on the radio. I was very fortunate, and we became close friends, and I don't think you could listen to Malachi and not have a strong opinion one way or the other. I would classify myself as an agnostic, but Malachi affected me deeply, very, very deeply with much of what he said. And a lot of things he said very much stick in my mind. One of those would be that in the streets of New York City, an area he frequented, he thought that the number of possessed, and I mean possessed by the devil, by Satan, were increasing by about 800% a year. That's frightening. He further suggested that as he walked down the street in New York, he could look into the eyes of many of the people that he would pass and know that they were one of the, what he called, perfectly possessed. And that's pretty frightening. So there are many things like that he said to me that will never leave my mind and will probably worry me to the graves. He speculated that these were people that had made deals with the devil, if you will, and are now financially reaping the benefits of what eventually will scorch their soul. He was a fascinating man. He also said a lot of things to me in private. We did talk a great deal. My wife at the time, now passed, was Catholic. And he was aware of the contents, the full contents of the third secret of Fatima. And he shared some of those that I cannot share with you or anybody because I promised. What he did say, if you want something chilling, is that try and imagine the very worst thing that you can imagine. We live now in the days of ISIS and terrorism and people getting burned alive, and so one can imagine some pretty bad stuff. He said, imagine the very worst you can imagine, and then I will tell you that it's going to be much worse than that. And he did it with an Irish accent that added the stamp of authenticity to somebody who's been a consultant to two popes. So there you have my immediate thoughts on Father Malachi Martin. I guess I would add to that I was told one day, tragically, that he fell down the steps. And I do wonder about that. To summarize Malachi Martin is only to say the real thing. He was the real thing. We've been looking for somebody who even approximates the real thing since, and he's not there. That's why I'm sure the cameras are pointed at me now.
Well, I think he was a singular character at a time where there wasn't much knowledge of this whole field. But I've known scores of exorcists. I know scores of exorcists. And many of them are incredibly intelligent, wise, experienced exorcists. And they're prudent too. And I would say that there are many exorcists who certainly are as knowledgeable as Father Martin, who I've been told was primarily an assisting exorcist. But there are many exorcists who have a lot of experience, and I've worked with some of them, and so although I was exposed to some of Father Martin's ideas early on, I've certainly learned just as much from many subsequent exorcists that I've known and became friends with. Somebody told me once, and I don't know if this is true, that Father Martin once claimed, and this may not be true because there were always a lot of rumors about his life, some of which I think are not true, although I don't know if they all are, that Father Martin supposedly said that half the people languishing in mental institutions are suffering from demonic problems. I think that's not only mistaken, I think that's a very imprudent thing to say. So he could exaggerate things. That doesn't discount the good work that he at times undoubtedly did.
When I first met Malachi Martin, he was a very small, slight man. He wasn't very big at all. But I was very familiar with his career. Years ago, people used to look forward to sitting down reading a book. And Hostage to the Devil was probably one of the very first books I was reading in regards to some of this work. And finally had the opportunity to meet him when he was speaking at a small event. And we afterwards were just going back and forth, and we were just standing there talking. And he would have this look. He would just look at you, which is something that you notice with a lot of spiritual people. They'll just look to see, and that basically tells me they're trying to get a good sense of you, and they're trying to figure out what the heck is this person all about. And we just had a little bit more of a conversation at that point in time, and we were talking back and forth. And he was intrigued that I was in the work for a while, and that some of the people I've met and some of the things I've been involved with. Well, some time had gone by, and I get a telephone call from him, and we were talking, going back and forth, and I was okay, very interested in it, and listening to what he was saying, and I basically knew what he was doing, trying to figure out where I was coming from, because you have to remember when you get involved with this field, it's so important to be able to be guarded and careful with the people you associate yourself with, because people will go after you in a heartbeat to be able to tear you down. And we had a few more conversations after that. Then out of the clear blue, I get a telephone call from him one day, and he goes, "John, I have a couple of cases here I'd like you to evaluate and check out." So I did, and one was in Milford, Connecticut, and the other one was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Well, I evaluated everything and went in, did what I needed to do, and I gave him a call, and I was explaining to him that I felt the case in Milford, Connecticut was probably legit. There were things going on, and I explained to him that the Bridgeport, Connecticut case, I didn't really feel that it was something demonic, but people that were a little bit more hysterical and hyping things up. And we talked a little bit deeper, and then all of a sudden, he just got right off the phone. I was like, okay, that was interesting. And didn't think too much more about it. And then a few weeks went by, and I was talking to him again. And I said, Father, what was your take on all that? And he goes, well, I was curious to see how you investigated what you did and how you went about it. I said, okay. I said, what do you think? He goes, I was testing you. And I went, you were? And I go, okay. He goes, I wanted to see. He goes, my opinion was the same thing. Then I had found out not that long afterwards that Father had come and done a mass and done a few other things in the Milford one, but he never really did anything with the Bridgeport one. And then after that, there was a lot of socializing. Met him several different times, sitting down talking with him. But there was one thing that I got a better understanding when it comes to him is you learn within our field of the demonology and being involved with all this, there's certain things you just don't talk about. You leave it alone. And I've learned that over the years. You just don't. And I'm a very forceful person. When I want to know something, I won't let up. I will keep it up and keep it up. I was sitting talking to him, and I wanted to know about a few of his cases, especially what happened to him in Africa, because he talks about it, and he would go, and he just sat there, he looked at me, and he goes, "Sometimes you just leave things alone. You don't wanna give it the recognition." He says, "You don't wanna bring it right back into the forefront again." And I was like, "But people wanna know." He goes, "I'm sure they do." He goes, "But I just do not like to talk about certain things." And I never pushed it with him after that. Father, Malachi Martin was extremely important to me for several reasons. He became a friend. It's most important when you're working in this field to associate yourself with people that have an understanding of this work and they know what they're doing. He's already been there. He's done that. He knows what to look for, what not to look for, what to watch out for. When, I grew up in that era where you spoke to people that, have been involved with the field. And he was a key element with that. He had a very good understanding of that. Plus, I knew, he was behind the scenes, involved with a lot of different things, and to me, he was a person of knowledge, and he would share knowledge to be able to help protect you, to be able to help an individual, and then he would draw the line. And now I understand that. Years later, you learn to understand the comprehension on the way certain things go and why people, a lot of times just won't talk about things. But like I said, I'm a very inquisitive person, always have been, 42 years in the work now. I understand now why he reacted the way he did with certain topics and certain things and just did not want to talk about them. I was always intrigued by his knowledge and what he experienced, and he had written about many of the different things that he was involved with, but he would only go so far and he wouldn't talk too much in depth. I was very curious to see what happened to him in Egypt. What did he experience? What did transpire there? Well, he would talk, he would say a little bit, and then he would just stop. And I said to him at that point in time, I go, Father, it's important. And he looked right at me and he goes, John, he said, sometimes you learn just to leave things alone. Don't give it the recognition. Don't bring it back to the forefront. And I didn't understand that at that point. Today, I do understand that. A lot of things that we get involved with, a lot of cases, I don't even talk about them. And, he was a very knowledgeable individual for getting that understanding and getting that perspective. And now I can look back upon that and say, this is why Father wouldn't talk about it. This is why he would not go into too much depth about certain things. It was a very good training ground, and the man was phenomenal with understanding a lot of the things. Over the course of the years, I've worked with a lot of exorcists involved within the Roman Catholic Church and other religions, and they all seem to have that same MO about them. They'll talk about things, they'll share information with you, and then they become very guarded. Today, I got a good understanding and comprehension of that. If you think about that, look at the soldiers in the military. They've been involved with battle. And a lot of times they don't talk about it and they keep that information to themselves. Exorcists do the same thing. But I got a good comprehension of that today. Why? It's not good to give it that amount of recognition. You have to be able to protect yourself, protect the people you're with. So, again, I get involved with a lot of things and I just don't talk about them. I don't bring them to the forefront. Now I can understand why a lot of the exorcists I've worked with over the course of the years, they don't talk about these things. They don't bring it to the forefront. Why? They just don't want to give it the recognition and they prefer not to even remember it. Getting to know him, and understanding him, I think like with most individuals, I'm a typical, I don't even really know how to describe myself, but I'm a very earthy person. And I curse a lot, I swear a lot, and I say what's on my mind. And, a lot of people are very guarded around spiritual people, especially clergy, to do that. Well, I had found over the course of the years with individuals, and oh, you just made me remember something. I remember him saying this to me. Wow. Okay, in a conversation. You know, um, when talking to an individual, I don't ever put anybody, up on a pedestal. We're all human beings. We might be, special in certain things that we do. And I like to be able to talk to an individual and speak the way I usually do. And it reached a point where, I was having a conversation with him and I would just start swearing. Well, he would chuckle. He just chuckled a little bit. And then I was just like, well, I hope you don't take offense to that. I said, but that's my character. And I said, that's just me. And he goes, John, you're like an open book. He says, you use profanity. He goes, you're very earthy. He goes, you're the type of person that you can trust, just like your buddy, Ralph. There were several times where I was having a conversation with him, and I mean, he would just start talking, in such a contact. How do you say that? Bro, yeah. He would just start, and I'd go, I don't even know what the hell you're saying to me. Then he would chuckle a little bit, and he'd go, oh, and then he'd go right back where I would be able to comprehend what he was just saying to me. But, you know, a lot of times dealing with spiritual people in our field, with this, it's almost like they look at something that none of us understand, and they look at a quality, if you will, at something. I mean, I did say to him at one point in time, I said, "Okay, why are you even asking me to do anything?" And he had this little chuckle that he would do, and then he would go, "Well, just looking for certain individuals that are more interested in helping people than just looking for people more interested in helping individuals than any of the other nonsense." I didn't understand what he meant by nonsense. I do today, but he in talking to him and going back and forth, I think he would look at individuals, and I believe very strongly that he had that gift of discernment of being able to know an individual, pick up on an individual, and understand them. That's why today I understand when people look at individuals, they look at them because I believe very strongly in that old saying, "The eyes are the window to the soul." And I believe he had that ability to be able to pick up on a person's spirit and energy and know whether, that connection was going to be there, to be able to trust that individual. Because that's a key element in our field, to trust. You have to be able to trust each other. Because if that trust isn't there, it's a dangerous situation. Malachi Martin, in the conversations I've had with them and the several times I was in his presence, I found the man to be very sincere. He, I do feel, paid a big price. Most exorcists do, where there's things that affect their lives, their personal lives, their environment, and they lead a very difficult life. And I've seen that in Malachi Martin, in a few conversations that I did have with him, that it was very isolating and it was a very difficult thing. But I found him to be an extremely, extremely holy person. He believed truly in what he was doing. He believed truly in what he was practicing. And he stood on his merit. He stood on what he believed in. And he stood on what was right. There's one thing that people have to understand. He broke ground. Now, what do I mean by that? He went public. He started doing appearances and radio shows talking about this topic, demonology, possession. These things exist. These things do happen. And he was ridiculed. And I do feel that he paid a very high price for that. Why? A lot of people don't want this exposed. People don't want the devil exposed. People hide behind this. So I think when he really came to the forefront, he was a pioneer in it, like several other individuals out there, and bringing this information to the forefront. It's very dangerous. But he, again, stood his ground and he brought it to the forefront. He talked about it publicly. And I do feel that it, affected him. He was crucified basically behind the scenes, with the church and people ridiculing him. That's one thing I wish, so many different spiritual people I know, including Malachi Martin. I wish he was still around today to see how in 2015 things have changed. Things are brought out more into the forefront. More of our spiritual, religious people are recognizing it. The Vatican is even looking at it differently today. So yeah, I always often think about so many of these people, just like Malachi Martin, how I wish they were here today because I know what he'd do. He'd sit there and go, just like that. I know it. I know that's how he would respond to it today. Because finally, he broke that ground and he tried to bring things to the forefront. He tried to get as many people involved to get an understanding of all this. And like I said, that's one thing I wish today is that people like Father Malachi Martin, I wish he was around just to see how things have changed over the course of the years. Malachi Martin's book, Hostage to the Devil, you have to really take a step back and think about that title. With exorcists and people that get involved with doing exorcisms or any way of form, are they technically hostage to the devil? Yes. Each and every time, a person gets involved and starts performing exorcisms, a piece of them dies off. The more that they're out there, just like Father Malachi Martin, the more he would help people, the more he would become a target. And whether it would be something on a spiritual level or people that are involved with occult activities, these individuals become target. So technically, if you're looking at it, I can understand why he chose that title to that book. He was indeed hostage to the devil. He had to be guarded. He had to be careful. Was he continuously attacked in the spiritual realm? Absolutely. These people pay a big price for getting involved with this type of work. It affects their personal lives. It affects everything about them. And it's a very isolating world. There's parts of them that no one will ever know, some of the things they endure on a spiritual realm. Do I feel that Malachi Martin at different points in time paid a price for being involved with that, getting involved with exorcisms? Yes. Do I feel he knew what he was doing? Absolutely. Why did he do it? Because he wanted to help people in the name of God.
I think we need a lot of Father Martin. As I told you before, I think that among exorcists, there are two schools. The first one, the very shy ones, those who want to keep low profile, we need to be prudent, etc. I don't like those. I respect them. I don't like them. Why? Because you're not doing weird things. You're not a crazy guy. You're a man of faith, and you're trying to promote faith and to prevent people on these things. So you have Father Martin in Ireland, in the United States. You have in Italy Father Amorth. In the United States, you have also Father Gareth Thomas, that he became famous for the Book of the Rite, for the novel. And so I would prefer many priests like this. But if this priest, like Father Martin or Father Amorth, they're strong in their faith, they know what they're saying, they don't want to cause a scandal, but they just want to tell the truth. Hallelujah, my friend. We want those because it's the best opportunity to evangelize. It's a great instrument to help out people to know that the devil exists, yes, but we are also telling people that God exists, that God is more powerful, that love is more powerful than evil. And so for me, we need many, many Father Martins.
Thanks for listening to our podcast, and remember about our Facebook page where you can find out more information about our documentary. If you have some spare cash, then please buy us a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/HTTD podcast to help us keep this podcast going. And it would only be right to finish with the main man himself.
In this world of man, this cosmos, there are just two main forces, God and evil, personified in Satan and Lucifer. And finally, since everything is being globalized today, evil itself is globalized. And what before was practiced by small communities and small sections of communities, small little groups, covens as we used to call them, is now becoming the way of life and the way of thought of whole populations, according as their morals and ethics are completely degraded and reduced to materialistic terms and hedonistic aims and totally this world view of things. And that is the reign of evil, and it is directly in contravention to the reign willed by God, who is the sovereign creator and master of all things. So that's the situation today. The evil is, no doubt about it, more organized, more globalized, and it comes out in the New Age, which is the deification of man and the creation of man's habitat as the only aim worth having, whereas this is not God's aim in this life for human beings.